Well, first place, thank you, Marta, and thank you, the Museum of Soares do Reis, for this venue. I would like to say to people that don't know that Museu Soares do Reis is actually a pioneer in relation to developing experimental and very advanced projects, namely in the 70s, late 70s. There was a contemporary art center that was developed inside this museum that later on became the new Contemporary Art Museum of Serralves. The nucleus, the mind, the mastermind of that project actually was developed here by several artists and a critic, an art critic called Fernando Pernes. It was a very important guy in the late 70s, beginning of the 80s. So though today Soares do Reis, a specialized museum, is focused on certain periods of art history, it is very it's very interesting that this meeting is taking place here right now, because it's a meeting also, I hope it will be the beginning of a new thing in the art world in Oporto. Oporto is a very interesting town because it's a quiet town, but where things happen. I don't have, as I told you, my laptop, so I cannot show you some of the websites that would illustrate what I've been doing, namely with the Museum of Contemporary Art of Badajoz, the Meiac, but I will try to give you a picture of it. Well, in the first place, I started in 1994 a project in Lisbon called Aula do Risco, which is actually kind of a company dedicated to developing creativity strategies. That means it's a school, very special school for very few people, where we try to develop creativity strategies. At the same time, Aula do Risco is a producing company. We think about projects and we develop projects. And in '94, we opened that school and that project company. And in '95, we went to Madrid, to the art fair in Madrid called Arco, to show what we were doing at the time. And then that's when I met António Franco, the director of the Museum of Badajoz. He was at the time showing works by a German artist called Wolf Vostell. And we had, like, you know, love at first sight. We just met and we started working together since then. So we have a 10 years cooperation till now. Actually, in '96, I presented a show at the museum called Ex Mater. And Ex Mater was a show about building a small town dedicated to art and technology. We actually have a site in Portugal where we try to convince the people, the town, the little town, the village actually, and the politicians to do it. And we actually got very good support, I mean, very good will, but we didn't get the money till now. So we had a show at the museum where we presented that project. It would be a town for artists and for scientists and for technologists. People would come and would stay and would live there and would have a museum, what we called at the time the virtual museum. The virtual museum was an underground museum, so all the architecture was invisible. People would to go underground because most of techno art needs darkness. So it was the basic idea, and also it was the idea of not spoiling the space, which happens to be a very beautiful space, given in the 18th century or 19th century to the town by the king of the time, for the specific purpose of developing the arts. And until now, they didn't do anything. So it's an open space still, 200 years after that. Well, so that's when we start working together, and I've done a few presentations of art and technology through this museum in Madrid. Basically, once a year, I've made at least 2,003 different presentations in Madrid on specific projects related to art and technology. So the museum got a very huge visibility since then through that kind of curatorial activity. And finally in 2005, 10 years after the opening of the museum, I curated a show called Metamorphoses. Metamorphoses was a show and a catalog book about the developing of a new concept that I've been working on since 95 or 96, which is a concept of post-contemporary culture. At the time I didn't have catch the name. Now I got the name. I think that's the concept of post-contemporary culture, which is not postmodern. Postmodernism is, there is a lot of noise about that concept. But reflection about post-contemporary culture really actually began in the beginning of the 80s. I actually curated a show with other people in '83 called After Modernism in Lisbon. But then in the late 80s, postmodernism became a very reactionary movement, actually. Basically, you know, wild painting, bad architecture, and so on, and worst philosophy.